there's so much that could be happening no matter what happens to number one interest rates and number two what happens to the housing market and people's reaction to it. Hey, what's up, everybody? It's your boy Juju, and welcome back to the 1% of Juju podcast, where we teach you the practical steps to live your life like the 1%. Don't know why I'm so excited about doing this episode, but I am. We're here. We're going to have some fun. We're going to learn some stuff. But before we do, make sure that you are subscribed to the podcast. The reason why is because I told you so. No, but seriously, we are coming up with some fire episodes, with some fire content. We're going to start getting guests back on the podcast. I've just been a little all over the place, a little busy. So it's been a period. Summer 2022, it's hot boy summer, so let's have some grace, but we're going to get the guests back on the podcast. Don't worry. We're going to have a good time. Last week, if you haven't listened to the podcast episode last week, I don't understand how to tell you. Subscribe to the podcast, tune in to what we have to say. We have some good stuff to say, but we spoke about the looming recession, right? And how that is a big topic of conversation for a lot of people. So if you missed that, make sure I will link it somewhere here, but make sure that you go listen to that. It's a very interesting and very important episode and how to handle that. So we're going to follow up on that and continue that conversation and talk about real estate specifically and if you should purchase a house in 2022 and what the considerations that come with that are. So we're going to speak about that. So to preface this, the reason I want to speak about real estate is kind of funny, but I don't know if it's funny, but it is funny to me. But I spoke at a few events, and every single time I speak, they introduce me, or people say like, "Oh, I've heard about the podcast," which is very humbling and very exciting, first of all. But they're like, "Oh, I've heard about your podcast. You're the real estate investor, right?" And people introduce me as like the real Juju, the real estate investor, 1% of Juju, the real estate investor. I'm like, it's always so interesting to hear that because I don't even know if I can consider myself a real estate investor, right? It's humbling to hear. It's really enjoyable to hear. But at the same time, I was just some idiot kid at 23 years old that decided to try to buy a house. Like literally, like if I went to go into story time, when I was 23, I didn't really have money. I didn't really have a job that made a lot of money and didn't really have savings or anything like that. And I remember going to different mortgage advisors or going to the bank specifically and asking them like, "Hey, I want to buy a house." And they used to look at me like, "Cool. A lot of people do." Keep going out there, and they almost look at me like I was crazy. But that was really before I bought my first place. And that's how I kind of got into the real estate game and, got some luck. And like I said last week, diligence, and discipline. That's what kind of led me to where we are today. And but that's really what it is. Like I don't even know if I call myself a real estate investor, right? Because I just took advantage of that and started learning a little bit and things of that nature. But hey, I guess I am an investor now. That's who I am, and we'll take the accolades. But obviously, I do enjoy real estate, right? I do love the concept of real estate because I think it's really cool of an investment vehicle. But at the same time, it provides some housing for a lot of people, so you get the opportunity to do some good and provide value. That's always, my number one goal is have a positive impact on people, and and obviously putting a roof over people's head. You get to do that because not everyone is in a position to be able to buy a home. So a lot of people need to be able to buy them and rent it out to someone else. So that's why I like it. Another reason is obviously we're always going to need that, right? No matter what company, no matter what business and how great you think it is, to some extent it is, you can get rid of it, right? Like you can, a lot of services you can, business services, products you can do without. So it's finding something that people will truly always need, no matter what, no matter the situation, no matter the risk, right? Like there can be a complete, we spoke about the recession, and obviously we're diving more into it today. there can be a complete recession where everyone loses their job and things like that. Like there's a lot of things that are going to be considered commodities, but real estate is always going to be something that people need. Like housing is always going to be something that people need. So that's why, a little bit of my love is in that. But I also obviously diversify and invest in a variety of things. Having issues with my mic here, so I hope this is an easy fix. But anyway, you guys can still hear me, I hope. So let's talk about what's happening this year. So in April of 2022, if you listen to this, we're now in May of 2022. You might be listening. No, you'll still listening to this in May, hopefully. But Toronto saw a 16% increase in its housing market from April 2021 until April 2022, which is insane because we're talking about the talks of a looming recession. And it's crazy to think that homes have year over year increased at a 16% interest rate over the past 2 years every year. A little scary, but I know that a lot of people are going to tell you, that those prices are about to go down. Just you wait a little bit to buy the dip, and it's a lot easier for people to say that and to try to predict what's going to happen next based on what we've seen. And obviously, we've seen interest rates go up, and we've seen all these different things that we've obviously discussed in the past. But the reality is you still can't completely predict what's going to happen next. So as much as experts are there's a lot of people that are a lot smarter than I am that you should probably listen to as well. But there's no expert. If you talk to the really, really, really smart people and the actual quote unquote experts, they will tell you that they can't tell you what's going to happen next, right? No one really knows that information. And I think that a lot of times there's some people that kind of come with the authority of like, oh, well, here's going to happen next. And they try to convince you that they know and they have the understanding because they've been invested in real estate for I don't know, like 5 years, that they understand what's coming up. But that's just not a reality, right? So with interest rate risings and the economy slowing down, there are a few things that could happen to the housing market. And I'm going to talk about a few of those today and maybe speak to a little bit to how you can handle it, how you can prepare for it, if you should or should not purchase a house this year. So number one, people could try panic selling, right? Like one thing that could clearly happen is people could just try to get rid of their homes. Maybe they got into homes that they couldn't afford. If you got a variable mortgage, that means that your mortgage isn't fixed for a long period of time, right? Like, so when you get a fixed mortgage and you get a 5-year, 5-year term, or you can get it for 30 years, what your mortgage payment's going to be for that set amount of time. If you get to a certain point where you get a variable mortgage, well, your mortgage is changing every so often. So you never really know what it's going to be. And if you were already overstretched and you couldn't afford your mortgage payment in the first place, now that the interest rates are increasing, well, now you're even further from being able to afford your interest rate. So a lot of people could go into panic selling, trying to get rid of the home that they couldn't afford before, right? This could mean that there's an added amount of supplies. Maybe people need to sell and get rid of that faster in order to avoid, real financial downturn, which gives the buyers the leverage again. But number two, people could also be afraid of such a thing, right? And therefore, people decide not to sell their homes. People could say like, oh no, like in the past few years, everything's been going up, up, and up. And now I'm in a position where I want to sell and I want to take advantage of all that money and all those outbiddings and things of that nature. But now it doesn't really make sense because moving and buying another house would still cost quite a bit of money. Might as well just stay in the home and, keep the money where it's at, keep my whatever value and wait for it to rise back up. This would lead to another supply shortage and leverage is back to the sellers, right? Those are some things that genuinely could happen. There could be other regulatory decisions made for whatever reason, and they can have whatever impact, right? So a lot of people think that regulatory, and let me give you an example. I think that it's easier to explain with an example because let's say affordable housing, right? Like that's something that's obviously very important. It's important to get as many people in homes, and it should be affordable no matter how much you make and no matter what job you do, right? Like homes should be affordable. So An example that's actually a concrete example in San Francisco, they passed a variety of laws to make sure that housing becomes more affordable, right? So, but at the same time, it made it harder and more expensive for landlords, for developers to have new projects, to be landlord. It was taxed at a very high rate and things of that nature. What ended up happening and what that led to is less developers starting new projects and less people wanting to be landlords in general. Well, that led back to another housing shortage, and which made the prices go up because now the couple of people that own homes, they're now the ones really taking advantage, and they can charge whatever they want because they basically have a monopoly because there's more demand than there is supply. So although the goal of the regulatory decision, but I can probably show you another example of someone trying to have the exact same law in another place, but in that situation it actually led to a decrease in home costs and in home prices. So it's not as set in stone. Like these regulatory reasons, like, there's human decisions that go into that can impact it and have whatever impact at the end of the day. So the moral of the story, you have no clue what is really going to happen, no matter what rules are going to happen, no matter what, the health crisis is happening that we have going on right now, right? We all thought that we'd be down in the gutters right now. No matter what happens to the economy, all those different things, you don't know how that's going to impact the housing market and things of that nature. Here are the other considerations when you're wanting to buy a home this year. Mortgage costs, right? Interest rates have recently increased. If you're thinking about, offering 500K on a house, a mortgage payment that you could previously afford when interest rates were, let's say, 1.5% on that mortgage, but you may not be able to afford that same monthly mortgage payment now that interest rates are 2.5%. There's also a chance that interest rates are going to continue to rise. So if you are looking at a variable interest rate that I spoke about before, right, there's a chance that those interest rates go up with time and your mortgage becomes less and less affordable. But there's also chances that interest rates decrease. So if you get in a fixed interest rate and now interest rates are decently high, and I feel like I'm saying the word interest rate like a million times at the time, but those interest rates could decrease over time, and now you're stuck in a really high interest rate in a fixed mortgage. It's a situation that actually happened to me. My first property, like I told you guys, I was running around trying to find a place. I actually didn't finish the story. That's so awkward. But I was trying to find a home basically, and people kept telling me like, "Oh no, you're not eligible. You can't buy the home." But I'm just like really bad at listening to people's advice and listening to people telling me what to do. So I ended up finding a way to purchase a home anyway, with basically everything I had in savings. And actually, I feel like I told this story before, and it ended up working out for me. Right, it could have went down. The value of the home could have went down significantly, but it ended up going up, and I ended up being able to take advantage of that. But that's, once again, it's luck. It's something that it's just stubbornness on my end and things of that nature. But I did get stuck in a pretty high interest rate. It's not a high interest rate. It was less than 3%. But at the same time, like when interest rates went down a couple months later, and now was in a higher interest rate in a fixed mortgage that I was able to finally refinance at some point, just because of the nature of the home going up in value. That's a situation that ideally you wouldn't want to be caught up in. So that's a little bit of what could be happening at that point. So the only reason I share this is because there's so much that could be happening no matter what happens to, number one, interest rates, and number two, what happens to the housing market and people's reaction to it, that you wouldn't want to purchase a home if you're in a couple of situations. Number one, you wouldn't want to purchase a home if you're just dealing with really tight cash flow, and you're just thinking about the home of as, oh well, instead of buying the home and paying rent, instead of just paying rent and renting a home, I'll just buy the home because the mortgage payment is the same. Because there's a lot of payments that go into being owner of a home. Taxes, that's an amount that also could be fluctuating at year over year, so based on the value of the home. Maintenance, a lot of things, guys. As soon as you become a homeowner, the first thing that's going to happen is something that you didn't expect going wrong, will go wrong. And the littlest of things that you just assume now, like, oh, when this goes wrong, I call a landlord. Now you are the landlord. You are on your own. You're by yourself. If your faucet is leaking, all of that, that's another bill. If you're something bigger, if your roof has something wrong with it, all those expenses all fall on you. So those are expenses to keep in mind, and other monthly expenses, right? You could be dealing with condo fees, utilities, all those different things. They all fall on yourself. So if you're dealing with really, really tight payments, you want to keep that in mind before you just jump into purchasing your next home. Number two, you might want to think about how long do you want to have a home. On average, people say that it takes about 5 years for whatever you put into the home to actually make sense and to be worth it. So if you're thinking about, I know a lot of people right now are looking at relocating. People are moving to places where they can work remotely and things of that nature. And it's given a lot of people more flexibility and more ability to travel as they're not tied down to one place. Well, another issue with that is you might not want to buy a home because it might take you a while for you to get the money out of it, right? So if you're just putting, let's say, a down payment down, it's not just as easy as, well, I'll pay for it for a year and then I'll have paid some of my down payment down and then the home will have increased in value, because you can't expect the home prices to just go up 16% year over year for the foreseeable future. Home prices might go down a little bit or might go back up. And also, even if they stay even, in a year, if you account for taxes, property taxes, maintenance, all those different costs that we just mentioned, you're realistically not breaking even if you're paying down some of your mortgage, your interest, obviously, and all those different things. Those are all things that are getting paid every year. So you're not even breaking even on the home, and to the purchasing or closing costs on both ends could be significant and could be really expensive. So those are some things that you want to, once again, keep in mind. Number three, one thing that I've really enjoyed doing has been flipping homes. That might also be something that's really difficult because you're not finding kind of those deals, those diamonds in the rough, because people know that they can now sell them to investors for insane prices. And now you're dealing with not maintenance, but labor costs, are really expensive. Products, obviously, there's been a shortage in lumber. All of that is really difficult to get and really expensive. So dealing with all that, it might be harder for you to break even or make money in a short term when you're going about flipping your homes. So the the lesson of all of this, as I start wrapping up here, is that you can continue purchasing homes. And I don't think it's going to be a bad idea. I've seen a lot of information out there talking about how bad of an idea it is to purchase homes this year or to do anything when it comes to real estate this year, which I don't believe it's necessarily a bad idea. The only thing that I would tell you is, number one, make sure that you have a solid emergency fund outside of the down payment, right? Make sure that you have your down payment, but then restock that emergency fund. I know it happens to a lot of people when they buy their first property, is like they take basically most of what they had saved up or stashed aside. Make sure you revamp that as soon as possible. Number two, make sure that you can account for a lot of those numbers and account for more than what you think is going to be required. Don't just look at the mortgage payment and go about that. Number three, make sure that it's a home that you plan on staying up for at least, I would say, 3 to 5 years, minimum 3. Try to think about living there for 5 years. And if you make a quick profit and if another year goes by and you have the opportunity to make solid money off of it, then great. But don't necessarily don't necessarily expect that. And number four, make sure that if you're looking at flipping homes or making a quick profit off of it, make sure that you're well aware of, the costs of different things and how to go about, flipping a home, because there's a lot of things. Make sure you account for every calculation and everything that's going to go into your project. So I hope that was helpful at all. If it was, please continue sharing this podcast with some of your loved ones, or maybe some of the people you don't love so much. But that is really the only way that this platform grows, and I do appreciate when the platform grows. If you don't mind, if you can go leave whether it's 2-star, 3-star, but ideally a 5-star review on your favorite podcasting app, I would really appreciate that. Leave some ratings as well, and a couple comments. Tell us if you agree, disagree. If you're watching this on YouTube, obviously like and leave us a comment. Connect with us on social. All the links are in the description. As always, we're all over the place: TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, and but for today, we're going to wrap this up. And like I said, just be diligent as you go about your journey of purchasing a home. It can be really rewarding, but it can also lead to a lot of really bad things. And you guys obviously know about my story. If you don't, we'll link it right there as well. But as always, make sure that you're taking the steps today to ensure that you're 1% closer to your goals than you were yesterday. Thanks for joining, everyone. Have a wonderful day.